financial astrology for me was a real intuitive way of linking the material world with the spiritual world.
You are somebody I've met very few people who talk as fast as me. So, which is fun, but your Mercury, what is your Mercury doing in your chart?
We're in a time of super volatility. We've got a lot of synodic cycles happening this year. We've got Saturn-Neptune. We've got Jupiter opposing Pluto. We've also got Rahu entering Aquarius. So 2026 is kind of a crazy year.
The Saturn-Neptune story, which really began to emerge last summer, is literally, it is glamorous to be rail thin.
I'm not being sexist here. I'm just saying what the data has been presenting. And I do think there's this retrotide summer trend of people getting a lot thinner than they were, and a lot of money going into these kind of companies. So that's an interesting trend.
Lunatic astrology.
If you've been watching the stock markets and feeling something's not quite right, you're probably not alone. In our video today, astrologer Rowan Hogg, an expert in world financial astrology and the markets, will be taking us down the rabbit hole of how astrology does and can predict financial market turbulence, volatility, upswings and downswings. A big question a lot of people have is, are we ready for a massive correction? Is this 1929 all over again? At the same time, we're investing in gold and we think it's golden, or Bitcoin. Is that true? And what about that AI bubble? Is it really a bubble? In this video conversation between Rowan and I, we also cover specific industries that may indeed do very, very well in the next 6 months to a year, as well as places to be very careful. If you're at all interested in the global economy, the volatility, or the upswings that we might have ahead, including hint, look for bottom basket house prices next year where you can pick up a deal. You're in the right place. So welcome to this show where Rowan Hogg and I talk financial astrology, global markets, and what to expect over the next 6 months to a year. Let's get started shall we, and bring in Rowan to our Zoom room. In today's video, we're going to talk to astrologer of the financial world, Rowan Hogg. And in our video today, he's going to talk about what he thinks is up in the financial markets and the world economy during the next 6 months, the second half of 2026. And also, he's kind of a cool guy. I met him over on Substack and I was really loving what he was writing about. And, this was like at 16 years old, he talks about picking up the power of now and how it shatters his worldview, and spends the next several years in deep Eastern mysticism, Kriya Yoga, Indian spirituality. He's also Vedic and Western tropical zodiac educated. And that this kind of approach to his life is intriguing to me. Becoming a financial astrologer, as well as having that deep spiritual depth, is incredibly interesting as well. So we're going to talk to him about how he came to this world of figuring out the ancient truths and wisdoms of the spiritual path, at the same time overlapping that with becoming a professional astrologer, working with the markets and trading and advising people, as well as giving personal consultations and paid reports. Astrology is a really good predictor for world markets. It has historically shown to be accurate. So we're going to bring in Rowan into our Zoom room right now, and I hope you guys will give him a 2 thumbs up. And this is a collaboration, so you'll see any information about him, including his own channel or Substack, in the description box below as well. I am so excited to have a young and prolific astrologer, Rowan Hogg, here today, and he is amazing. At only 28 years old, I find his content in Substack. I think I'm reading somebody in their sage-like years like me in their 60s. He has been around the world, done the Vedic stuff, Jyotish, deep spiritual seeker, and he's figured out spirituality and money are not an anathema to each other. You can actually be working with money and wealth, the material realm, the Artha houses, and you can have a spiritual quest in your moksha life. That's my take on it. Rowan, welcome today. Will you tell us a little bit about how you got to be an astrologer before you laud us with the predictions of the next 6 months?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Laurie. I really appreciate it. We were just saying before, when I was starting out in my early journey, studying this, maybe 18, 19, you were one of the main resources that really turned me from skeptic into researcher and participant in the crazy world of astrology. So it's really nice kind of full circle moment. And yeah, I actually came more from a Vedic worldview background. I was more interested in meditation, altered states of consciousness, the Vedas, Kriya Yoga. I suppose there was a bit of that stereotypical hippie who just wanted to go straight to liberation before sorting out his career and his money. And eventually along the way, I get more involved in Jyotish, which was, a real huge discovery for me. And then we came across somewhere down the line, we went into financial astrology, which at first I thought was ludicrous, absurd. Surely there's no correlation. That sounds ridiculous. And and what do you know it? You go further down the rabbit hole, and there's many people involved in that world. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I guess the philosophical background is more that, in the Vedic worldview, you had to build your artha. This is one of the four purusharthas, the four goals of life: moksha, dharma, artha, and kama. Wealth is absolutely a fundamental aspect of building a spiritual life. Unless we're going to go live in an ashram and be a monk, most of us have to have our income sorted, our money, our career. That's just the system that we're in. That's the Kali Yuga. That's what we're going to deal with. So financial astrology for me was a real intuitive way of linking the material world with the spiritual world.
I love that. Yes, there's not one or the other. You can't. You got the pentacles and you got the cups and the swords and the wands and the tarot. You have the elements of life that are connected for everything to our thinking, feeling, and our bodies and our material world, as well as our spiritual. And I think that the balance is needed in life. And certainly that's not money that's the root of all evil. It's the love thereof. So the misunderstanding in the Bible, that misquote all the time, always makes my eyes roll. So today you've got some research for us to share, and we're happy to record on June the 9th. And we had by the way, you can find Rowan on Substack and YouTube, and this will be a collab, and information about him in the description box, guys. You're going to want to follow up. But we're just recording on June the 9th, and a few days ago on Friday, this is Tuesday the 9th, on Friday before this, we had a big market correction move, or what looked like a big sell-off in the broad markets. And as well, I think as of today, they had a dead cat bounce on Monday, but they're pretty turbulent still today. So, I mean, is it really just about the Iraq war and the Iran war and the oil and fertilizer crisis through the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, what's really happening here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you've got to zoom out and look at the macro context here. It's been a crazy year for markets. I mean, we started out with Saturn-Neptune. We know that's a huge shift in the world order. We know that's a shift in economies, tariffs, and trade, and all of that. We knew, in this astrological community that Iran war was coming. We've had starting the year, Bitcoin crashed down. It had a terrible start to the year. We kind of predicted that on our Substack. And recently, as soon as we had Uranus entering Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius, this correlated really well with this insane tech rally, in the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. Now, most of the American economy is really heavily weighted towards those tech stocks. It's basically like the top 10 tech stocks are the controller of the Western world, pretty much. And as soon as that trine activated with Uranus going into Gemini, we've seen the market up like 17% in that time frame. And if people aren't familiar with the general markets, that is not normal at all. We'd expect 7% return a year on average from like the S&P 500. So to have this insane explosion, some might call it an AI bubble, has been really interesting to watch. But we're in a time of super volatility. We've got a lot of synodic cycles happening this year. We've got Saturn-Neptune. We've got Jupiter opposing Pluto. We've also got Rahu entering Aquarius. So 2026 is kind of a crazy year, and we'll break it down month by month so that we can really understand what's going on from the macro astrology and the macroeconomics as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be wonderful to do. And reminding people, this is always speculation, just like stock investing traders and market analysts are never perfectly right. So this is not your financial information for you to use as if it's gospel truth. And in fact, we don't do that for you unless you're our client and you paid us and signed a non-disclosure agreement or a waiver or something. This is entertainment, but I will want to say, like what Rowan just said, like Saturn, Neptune coming together in Aries. And when Neptune is, a planet we associate with the oil and energy industry, and then Saturn is constriction and restraint, and Aries is a sign of war. Sometimes the astrology just gets like cartoonishly simple, and it's kind of funny that way, isn't it, Rowan?
Yeah, like we also saw like on an oil chart that I use for oil, not only is it Saturn Neptune, but we had that lunar eclipse was it early March was like about 14 Virgo. We had a lunar eclipse hitting the oil chart. And we also had that Mars-Uranus square, which pretty much kicked off the whole thing. And I have a couple of private clients who made a lot of money on oil ETFs, exchange traded funds there. Granted, again, just to reiterate what Laurie is saying, it's not financial advice. This is all speculation. That is, like the natural fifth house in astrology, there's speculation and risk to everything in life. I'm not providing individualized financial advice. I'm just layering different astrological theories and see whether they play out. And for sure, we get things right. For sure, we get plenty of things wrong. Just like any stock analyst on Wall Street, any technically trained analyst, astrology is just like another form of technical analysis or another form of cyclical analysis. We get plenty of things wrong. I mean, silver made a horrible call on silver, but alternatively, copper called for bullish through May through April, and now copper's all-time highs. So, it's there's definitely a there with the astrology. And I'd also just like to shout out to Christina, who you also had on your show back in November 2025. A lot of her things have actually played out really well. Christina Simon's doing great work on the financial astrology side. And also to Olga Morales, the WD Gann master. I will probably refer to WD Gann at some point here, and Olga is the one to look at there. So those are two videos to really look at again for sure.
I have had Olga on my channel as well as Christine, and probably we'll have to have Olga back. Maybe next year we'll do a financial panel with all the experts that you guys are. But yeah, astrology is a reliable indicating, like a tool that works. People say, how does it work? And who cares? It works. If you can use it for cycle repetition, pattern recognition, and predictive value, that's all you need to go. Is it works. We're in a simulation. Basically, if we agree it works, it's going to work. Yeah. Just before we move on, and we're going to talk about some of your thoughts about the cycles ahead and the months ahead, since you're both a practitioner user of sidereal or Vedic astrology with the real-time sky in terms of where the planets are now, and the Western tropical symbolic sky, have you ever come to reconcile the two types of astrology, which both work, and it almost makes no reason? You're using it for finances. Do you find, for example, that the Vedic approach or sidereal real-time sky and the nakshatras or lunar mantras are their own tool, or just an extra tool versus the Western tropical when you're using this? For sure. Yeah, I'd like to hear how you see that.
I'll try and make that as concise as possible, because as we both know, that's a 2,000-year-old argument. Many PhDs have been written on the subject. It's never going to be one of those things which just gets resolved with one YouTube comment. My preference is to use Vedic astrology with a tropical zodiac. And most people saying, if Rowan, you're saying you're a Vedic astrologer, why are you using the tropical zodiac? Because I actually think there's great evidence that a lot of those old Vedic texts specifically define the zodiac as tropical. I'm inspired by the works of Ernst Wilhelm, of Ryan Kurzak, of Victor Kara, who have provided excellent evidence and excellent education on this fact that the tropical zodiac may have been the original zodiac that was intended to be used. And the zodiac and the nakshatras these are two separate wheels. The tropical zodiac is just one minor adjustment. Pretty much everything else, 90% of Western astrology and Vedic is similar. We agree that there's modes. We agree that there's elements. We agree on the archetypes. We're just looking at the adjustment of the zodiac. Nakshatras are inherently sidereal. They're fixed to the stars. They are the constellations. We're just trying to decide, okay, does Aries fit at the start of Ashwini, or is it based on the solstices and equinoxes? And I find that if you go into those Vedic texts, Surya Siddhanta, et cetera, there's a lot of convincing evidence to suggest that the zodiac is set up tropically. We can still use dashas, nakshatras, yogas. We can use all of Vedic astrology. It's like 90% there. It's just a preference. It's just a choice of zodiac adjustment. So when people say Vedic astrology, it doesn't mean just sidereal zodiac. I have nothing against the sidereal zodiac. That's just my preference. You can use both. You can use tropical zodiac and inherently sidereal nakshatras, which form the basis of the dashas and all the rest of it. And a lot of the time, based on where the ascendant is, your tropical chart and your sidereal chart might be the first rising sign, might be the same first house. So it's I'm a bit of a Libra. I'm a Libra sun, so maybe I'm sitting on the fence. I don't want to start a war. I don't want to start an argument.
I'm sure you want to keep both sides happy.
Both sides, yeah. Unfortunately, that's my nature.
Well,
But yeah,
you make
so
me
that's
laugh.
how.
You make me laugh because, I have a similar view as you. I use a lot of Vedic tools using Western tropical zodiac, and they work perfectly well. But it is an existential conundrum. It's like, did time stop, when the vernal equinox was on the eastern horizon? Or is it that it's a symbolic zodiac of light and dark and seasons based on the northern hemisphere, which makes it a very Star Wars kind of vibration of light versus dark through the equinoxes and the solstices. So it's kind of a spiritual zodiac, a cosmological Star Wars in a way. So before we go on, I'm going to laugh. One thing, my worst call in all my stock market directions years ago was a silver play. Number two, you are somebody I've met very few people who talk as fast as me. So, which is fun. But your Mercury, what is your Mercury doing in your chart?
It's in Libra in the 6th house as the second house ruler, but it is trine to Jupiter. So
Oh, it's Jupiter.
There's some of that there.
It's Jupiter. It's wonderful. You speak lovely. You speak very quickly. Your mind is sharp and fast. I'm enjoying that. All right. So, guys, if you need to slow both of us down, go ahead. So I'm going to pass on to Rowan, who's going to tell us a bit about with some slides he's got, and we're going to break away to talk if we need to. But he's going to show some of his predictive thoughts about our economy and the markets over the next few months.
For sure. Let's share the screen. Thank you, Laurie. And we'll have a discussion of this. I don't want it to be like an information dump. We'll have a bit of a conversation. So just setting up where we are now, here's that insane tech rally as indicated by Uranus in Gemini trining Pluto in Aquarius. This pretty much happens, mid-April onwards. Give it a couple of degrees either side. This is insanity, basically. If anyone's new to the markets, this is not normal. For sure, a lot of money has been made on tech stocks and AI. There's also a lot of talk about, is this a bubble? Is that bubble going to burst? Are there going to be multiple bubble bursts throughout the next couple of years? For me, this looks unstably bullish, but I think we can ride this into July when that trine goes exact. Because this seems to be tracking really well, I think the peak of that energy is around when the trine goes exact around July the 7th. I think we can ride this bullish wave with the tech stocks up until then. But the second half of the year is a different story, in my opinion. So let's just quickly look at what's coming up. The biggest financial story in June is obviously the SpaceX IPO. Musk is tropical cancer rising. He's got the Jupiter Venus right on him. All eyes are on him. This IPO is not only one of the biggest in history, it's also a bit of a conundrum because it's going to be priced at roughly $135 a share. That gives it a valuation of 1.75 trillion, which means the stock is priced at 94 times its revenue. And by the way, it's been making losses. For reference, NVIDIA trades at around 17 times its revenue. If they price the SpaceX IPO at 135 a share, that means it's like 90 times its revenue. So it doesn't seem too good of an investment. There's also this issue where a lot of the Roth IRAs and the pension accounts and the retirement accounts may be exposed to this, whether you'd like it or not. There's been some rules being flipped around on the NASDAQ, and the point here is that this is a liquidity risk, and it happens at the same time that Uranus is squaring the nodes, right? So this could lead to a kind of mini correction within the next week or so, which could really dump on the market generally because it's so dependent on tech stocks. Where is this money come from? Where is all of this money that's getting sucked into the space IPO coming from? It has to create a bit of a liquidity suck event. It's Uranus square the nodes. It looks really unstable and quite bearish for the next week. So if you're a trader, a short-term trader, if you're into your options, the short-term stuff is more relevant to you. If you're a long-term buy and hold investor, this is a little less relevant to you. It all depends on the individual's strategy, their trading strategy, their personality, their birth chart. Now, when we get to June 15th, Bitcoin is suffering recently. At the start of the year, we said 2026 is going to be terrible for Bitcoin. That was based on Varshafala, based on Saturn going over the moon of the Bitcoin chart. We now have Saturn about to square the natal sun. The last time this happened was around 2013. There was a huge 60% loss, Saturn squaring the sun at the same time that Saturn is transiting the natal moon of the Bitcoin chart that I use. That's Sade. This will be there until around September. And I actually thought first bit of June, with the Jupiter-Venus conjunction would be bullish for Bitcoin. It's really suffering recently. It's just holding 60K. And it looks really bearish going into the second half of the year.
Can I ask a question? Just in general?
Yeah.
I mean, if people are pouring a PE ratio, price earnings guy's 94, if people are pouring money into the tech bubble, doesn't that simply mean money has migrated away from the culture of Bitcoin or crypto, and that's part of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where traders are getting their money from. Maybe they've made their gains on this crazy recent rally in equities, 17% up. Maybe they're going to try and put it into SpaceX. But I think there's a huge potential liquidity suck here, which is going to impact Bitcoin. And more and more people bringing money out of Bitcoin means that the weakness is going to be there. Bitcoin dominance is going to reduce. There's a speculative idea that this could maybe lead to a mini altcoin season, but that's very speculative. I think there's just a lot of further weakness, money being taken out of these risk assets around this time.
Risk assets. I thought Bitcoin was the new gold. I thought it was our head.
Well, that's the thing. Bitcoin, I love it. I love the Aquarian nature. I love the whole decentralized ethos. We can argue whether there's been some deep state involvement, whether it's not quite what it seems. I think it's ultimately something that's designed to be traded. It's stupidly volatile. It goes up in waves, goes down in waves. It's never going to be a stable currency. It's never going to be the world reserve currency. It's kind of just this alien thing that exists in and of itself.
It's like the tulips in Holland.
Yeah, it could be similar to that, It's just a weird entity that exists on its own. Now, I think it's great for trading. And, we cast the Bitcoin Genesis chart for short-term information. If there's Jupiter trines, Uranus trines going on, that was one of the aspects that we took a look at to predict it going around 80K in May. Aspects are very important in financial astrology. It's less about the signs and the houses. It's more about the aspects between transiting planets. But yeah, Bitcoin, certainly good for trading. I just wouldn't buy into the world reserve asset narrative.
Okay.
Now, kind of the big one for June is Jupiter into Leo, right? And there's really interesting research. I kind of picked this up from Grace Morris somewhere along the way. She's a brilliant veteran financial astrologer. In the tropical zodiac, whenever we have Jupiter going through a sign, not all the time, there's an eerie correlation with certain sectors doing particularly well. And that sounds like, pretty basic financial astrology 101. You'd be surprised at the data that comes through. For example, I think last time Jupiter was in Pisces, if we take the dates of that transit when Jupiter was in Pisces, an oil and gas ETF far outperformed the market. There was like 60% gains on that. When Jupiter was transiting tropical Gemini, there's literally an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, a basket of companies for anyone who's not familiar, called communications services. Jupiter in Gemini, that's one of our key words is communication. And this communications services ETF far outperformed the market. It's also the same with Saturn. I'm going to be putting out an article on Substack, which really breaks down all of that hard data, but there's a theme there. Jupiter in Cancer recently, food, nourishment, everyday staples. Walmart has done particularly well this year. Kroger, who's kind of like a Walmart-esque giant supermarket brand, done very, very well for themselves. So now we're looking at Jupiter in Leo and what potential themes are going to be coming up over this 1 year cycle. And this is kind of financial astrology 101. I would say there's kind of 3 levels here. There's level 1 financial astrology, where we can kind of set it and forget it. We can look at where Jupiter is. We can look at where Saturn is. And we don't have to be WD Gann masters with 1 billion astrological charts and fractals and all of that amazing stuff. We can keep it at like level 1, and we can just set it and forget it in Leo or, Cancer related ETFs, depending on the individual's own fundamental analysis, technical analysis, and due diligence. The level 2 is kind of more what I'm doing, Eclipse charts and layering some more charts on each other to create a narrative. And I'd say level 3 is more the WD Gann craziness, which, is a little less accessible. But Jupiter and Leo, what sectors or themes could we anticipate will do well? Gaming and esports, right? We've got coming into the World Cup. That's sporting energy. There's bets. There's tons of betting industries involved in that. Unfortunately, there's tons of gambling apps which are set to do really well from that by taking people's money, especially gambling apps which are going to be AI enhanced, to extract as much money as possible. If you don't have a karmic qualm about investing in that kind of stuff, then that may be an interesting one. Certainly entertainment and streaming, Leo, the creative, the film lover, the producer, Netflix, film industry, streaming platforms. Again, not to sound like a broken record, is it maybe AI really maximizes the efficiency of the production process for those stocks? Unfortunately, it is the case that whenever a company gets rid of a load of staff because of AI, the stock always increases. That's unfortunately the way of the world. Could that be happening with Netflix and streaming companies? Sports betting, we've kind of already mentioned. Prediction markets are certainly a kind of Uranus and Gemini combined with Jupiter and Leo theme, which I'm very interested in long term. We had a piece on Substack saying, look, if we're in an age of AI and I can produce a 5,000 word essay that convinces anyone of anything, how do we know if someone's got a certain level of conviction? And the prediction markets could actually be a very valuable tool in our society for determining who's putting their money where their mouth is. But also that's speculation.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about that? The prediction markets, so what I see you giving us, gaming and stuff could do really, really well. Like you want to invest in gaming stocks, but things like Polymarket, which really do give us information about where the majority of people place their bets, like who's going to win the election, who's going to win the sports game, when will the war end, all that good stuff. I mean, we can't really invest in those prediction markets. You're really just saying those prediction markets become what? They became more, you can't buy an ETF for Polymarket, right? So how do you apply Jupiter's expansion in Leo to betting markets?
Well, you're right. You can't invest in these, as a whole, but there are some financial technology companies who are implementing prediction markets into their platforms. One being Robinhood, the HUD app, ticker HUD. I'm not recommending that, but they had a serious amount of their revenue in the last quarter of 2025 coming in from prediction markets. Now, Robinhood, it's generally associated with young folks who buying and selling their stocks on their phone. They get prediction markets in there. That's a hell of a lot of revenue. Big trading platforms like Interactive Brokers, who are a platform to buy and sell your shares globally, they are now implementing their own prediction markets as a revenue source. So when companies implement it, that's how we can't invest in Polymarket or anything as it is. But when companies implement that technology, the evidence seems to suggest that there's a hell of a lot of money going into that now. But that's speculation,
Okay, I understand exactly. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and that's classic Leo. Let me just.
But can gold go any higher? I thought gold is going to top out by now.
Yeah, this is kind of a financial astrology 101 trap. It's kind of, Leo is ruled by the sun, therefore gold must go up. Backtest Jupiter in Leo as a single factor. That's never the case. If only if it was that simple, right? I would love it for it to be that simple, that every time Jupiter's in Leo, gold increases. Of course, we have to take into consideration the macroeconomics, what I call the macro astrology. Is there going to be a crisis of some sort? Is there going to be a war? We take into consideration the various charts for gold that exist. But for gold, it does look like this may have a bit of a bullish tailwind here. A lot of the investment houses are targeting $5,500 to $6,000 gold by the end of the year. There are tons of banks all around the world who are stocking up at gold right now, even though it looks like we're going for a bearish dip. So that, it's true. We don't always want to associate Jupiter and Leo with, that means gold is going up. It depends on what's happening in the world, what's happening in the wider economy, what thesis we can make from that. Having said that, with so many investment houses targeting 5,500 to 6,000, what's currently at like 4,500 or something, I haven't checked recently, there is a lot of heavy gold buying going on, which can be due to a multitude of factors, currency instability, money printing, finding out where the gold is, multipolar world, that kind of stuff. Also, we're looking at, an interesting one, something like retatrutide, these Eli Lilly, these GLP-1 drugs, these weight loss drugs. I think this is an interesting theme. Eli Lilly has been up about 18% over the last month because they've had a success with their trial drug, which is a weight loss drug by the name of retatrutide. And Jupiter in Leo, it loves to flaunt itself. It's summary. It's body confident. It's showing off what you've got. And dare I say that we're out of that Neptune in Pisces era where there was a hell of a lot of body positivity and equality and, love yourself no matter who you are. Now that Neptune's in Aries, I think that cultural shift is being changed. And the people who say, body positivity outside in public, they may be the ones to go straight for these retatrutide treatments in future. Now, I'm not saying I like that or I dislike that, but these are very brutally effective weight loss drugs. And there's been some interesting research actually tracking sales of luxury lingerie kind of companies, like your Victoria's Secret, that kind of stuff. I'm not being sexist here. I'm just saying what the data has been presenting. And I do think there's this retatrutide summer trend of people getting a lot thinner than they were, and a lot of money going into these kind of companies. So that's an interesting trend that I would like to keep an eye on over this period. You can certainly see the logic there. Government bonds, bond market has been going crazy recently. And again, as we said, gold, not because every time Jupiter's in Leo, gold increases, but due to the various macroeconomic factors, which seem to be suggesting a very bullish market for gold into the end of the year. Don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, either that or people can't afford to eat because the prices of food from inflation and fertilizer, they're not eating. But when you talked about that, it really resonated as likely true, that kind of glam about, my sexy body, my sexy bathing suit, my sexy lingerie. But it's also, to me, again, the sky is a cartoon to me. I think we're like literally in the weirdest simulation I've ever seen based on the minor asteroids being so accurate for people's lives. But if you think about the glamour of Neptune, Liz Green in her beautiful tome on Neptune really reinforces Neptune is the what we glamorize. And Neptune is with the lean one, Saturn. Right. Saturn and Neptune together close at hand. It's like Saturn always represents that which is constricted, constrained, or literally the lean one. So, well, it was body positivity for for a while, your big bad butt sticking out and, your voluptuous was relatively okay. The Saturn Neptune story, which really began to emerge last summer, is literally, it is glamorous to be rail thin.
Yeah, it's again, I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's body consciousness. There's certain spiritual perspectives on that. I'm just saying that drug is out there. Their companies are set to benefit. That's a cultural wave that may be incoming.
Neptune is a pharmaceutical industry next to the skinny one, the lean one, Saturn.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up, right? So in other words, we're going to have glamour and pharmaceutical and skinny Saturn, but they're going to start separating. And by April of 2028, they're no longer together in Aries, and that will probably be the disillusionment with that.
Yeah, interesting. It's kind of scary world, Pluto and Aquarius world. If you had a AI customizable drug or pill which solved all your problems, would you take it? It's kind of that Black Mirror, kind of themes going on there. But yeah, just from a market perspective, I'm trying to remain politically neutral here. I'm just trying to suggest where the money may be flowing. So that's
we're not endorsing this drug, nor are we continuing for taking it. We're just showing you where the money trail goes, guys.
Yeah, I'm not sponsored by Eli Lilly. I am not sponsored by pharmaceuticals companies for sure. Yeah, so we'll move on. Again, just to keep things concise, we've talked about that tech peak in July. This Barbault basket coming up is really interesting for matters of consciousness, for matters of AI. Tons has been said on that basket formation. For me, I've been interested in stocks whose natal charts, the IPO charts, are actually getting entangled with this. Now, I bought a stock called ServiceNow a couple of months ago. This was one of the stocks that was beaten down 50% in the market because of the SaaS apocalypse. That is the software as a service apocalypse, where everyone thought these software companies are going to be eaten alive because AI can do it. So the market really sent them down like 55% from year to date. When I looked at the IPO chart for ServiceNow, not only did I see that Uranus was coming in for the natal Jupiter around July, but one of my followers actually, I didn't catch it. You look at charts all day and sometimes you don't catch things. The natal chart had a ton of aspects with this Barbault basket. It was going off trines and sextiles, hitting the natal chart. So I've already got about 40% profit from that so far, but I may be holding it into the Barbault basket formation. It's interesting to see when stocks IPO charts actually intersect with these crazy
it would be good to explain to people, Rowan, what the Barbault basket is. You and I know, but people may not know. What is that?
Yeah, this crazy formation where we've got Pluto for Aquarius, we've got Neptune for Aries, Uranus at 4 Gemini, Jupiter at 4 Leo. they're aspecting each other in that crazy, crazy way. And many astrologers have talked about, is this a new age for AI? Is this something to do with consciousness, with human spirituality? What's going on here? There's much has been said about that, but I'm more looking at the economic perspective. What's going on here? Is it AGI? I don't know. That's a completely speculative idea. Do we have some sort of hyper efficient chip that's developed that really sends the AI bubble into a peak? I don't know. But certainly advanced micro devices is one stock that gets caught up in this. ServiceNow, which I've already profited off quite a lot, is already caught up in this. So it's interesting to see that these companies' natal charts can actually entangle with the crazy astrology in the sky. That's just a side note. It's not on any stock investment advice there. The big one for July is the Jupiter opposite Pluto. Again, Jupiter opposite Jupiter expansion, Pluto, banking, deep wealth. Where do we look? Where the last Jupiter-Pluto opposition was like 2013. We had Greece getting bailed out. We had the Eurozone crisis. We were recovering from 2008. There was a lot of economic issues and banking issues. That's just where the last opposition was. If we look at that synodic cycle, we can generate a story from that. That conjunction in 2020 with the COVID crash, then the square of that synodic cycle where we had these issues with Credit Suisse and First Republic and all these regional American banks. Now, as this opposition is coming in July, we've been hearing stories about private credit issues in banking, lending issues. Certainly, oil aspect is there. So I think this is a private credit issue. I think this is a banking story that's generally a negative bearish influence for the markets going into that. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. Jupiter-Pluto is quite a big one.
So, well, yeah. So you, in yours, I would go back throughout history for that too, but you're right, it is connected to the synodic cycle, which is the key point of astrology that's often lost on people. You can't look at an opposition as its own thing. It started with a conjunction in 2020 and a square and an opposition, like a new moon, full moon. This is trying to educate the audience to that these stories are part of a larger whole, like 3-act structure. So it'll also be interesting to go back over decades, and look at the long-term historical research on that as well, which you might have done in terms of economic indicators. All said and done, Jupiter wants to expand everything, and he's Mr. Entitled in the sign of Kings. And then we have a very powerful Pluto moving into out of bounds condition on the regular each late summer, early fall. So this Pluto has its own brand of energy right now, the kind that leads to people revolting over power over them. And so when I think of Jupiter, just as a lay person, I'm not a financial astrologer, but as a lay astrologer, like not using financial astrology yet in my life, I will. I'm like, okay, well, this is almost like the rich and wealthy sovereign class versus Pluto, who is a very big rebel in Aquarius.
Yeah, I mean, there is this theme right now just in the macroeconomics, that Pluto in Aquarius is very French Revolution. There's that huge wealth gap that led to the French Revolution. We have an insane wealth gap in our society right now. I think if we get into a recession in 2027, which is my thesis here, as you'll see, it's going to look weird if we have a situation where the housing market's down, we're in a recession in 2027, the average layman is not doing so well, and Elon Musk is the world's first trillionaire. It's not good optic, basically. It's very Pluto and Aquarius, French Revolution, wealth gap dynamics, which we could see for sure.
So it is, and it's even the American Revolution in the post, a Declaration of Independence era. They were creating the entirety of the, of the nation and the Constitution, and that all occurred because they were feeling oppressed by their wealthy, home country, England, who wanted all their tax money without representation. So again, when we have struggles around money, resources, and power, when Pluto's in Aquarius with US, with the revolution, with the French Revolution, but it's the out of bounds piece that Rosie Finn, a great astrologer, really dug into to see how this usually south declination out of bounds, which will be active this fall, looks a lot like the people trying to take power back from what they consider their oppressors.
For sure. We'll have to keep an eye on for that kind of stuff. And as you know, we've also got that Mars-Uranus conjunction July 4th, heading for the 7th house of the USA Sibley chart.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday. Yeah. Woo, celebrations. Now, again, much has been said about that, but from the economic side, this is a speculative idea that I've been playing around with. That Mars-Uranus conjunction could be many things, but Mars is attacks and Uranus is cyber and technology. I wonder if there's some sort of I'll just say it, a quote unquote attack. What's the most modern form of that? It's most likely cyber, right? I think I'm not saying that we have a big cybersecurity event here, but I'm suggesting that if such a thing was deployed, then the market would start to really value these cybersecurity firms and stocks and companies which are invested in cybersecurity as a whole. Now, this event will likely scare the market, whatever it may be, because it's unstable. The market doesn't like instability. It doesn't like confidence. It doesn't like knowing what the hell is going on. When there's instability and a lack of confidence in the markets, that can really shake them. This conjunction, I'm playing around with that cybersecurity idea, because why I say that is because as we go into 2027, this theme of quantum security is going to be super, super important. I think as quantum computing has been developing at a rapid pace, it's inevitable that this major cyber threat comes in with the quantum computers being able to crack your Bitcoin addresses and whatever help.
I know. I've been thinking about that for so long, Rowan. It's really like it's an inevitability that the ability of quantum computing and quantum computers to basically decode or hack or break the most, apparently secure, coding. So that's really, Bitcoin itself is vulnerable, and all the whole blockchain industry is based on this idea of the impenetrability of it. But I'm thinking cybersecurity absolutely in so many levels, because we think we're being surveilled and spied on just as general consumers these days. We want to have walls of security around us more than incognito in Chrome. You know what I mean? And so even WhatsApp no longer is safe to do without surveillance. They've declared that they're now a surveillance app. So people are moving to other apps like Signal. So I think the idea of security in general, from everything from like large scale attacks, nations against nations, but also just our individual lives, people want that security because we all have a sense that we don't have it. Like we're being surveilled. Surveillance state is coming.
Yeah, it's a super important theme over the next few years. And if you do have money in crypto projects, because I'm generally bullish on these crypto projects over the next few years, but we have to make sure that they are, if not quantum secure, at least quantum prepared. So the cybersecurity companies who are racing to make quantum prepared products, they should be benefiting. The crypto projects, which are a little bit more quantum prepared, like Hedera, Hashgraph, or there's even one that brands itself as quantum ready blockchain or whatever. Make sure that it sounds ridiculous, it sounds sci-fi, it sounds what do you mean there's going to be a quantum computer coming after my money? This is the Kali Yuga. Whenever we get new technology, it's going to be used in bad ways, and quantum computing is coming down the pipeline so fast that the companies that are working on defenses and preparedness for that are likely going to be benefiting in the long term. This is quite an important one. We do want to be concise, but it is an important one. Rahu entering Aquarius. This is a absolutely classic financial astrology cycle. This is North Node going through Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, etc. This was originally proposed by Louise McWhirter in the 1930s. She was kind of like the original financial astrologer of the 20th century. And she noted that the nodes traveling through Aquarius and Leo and Scorpio and Taurus really had a good job at tracking the real estate market and sometimes equities, i.e. the stock market, but majority real estate market. Now, we've got this entering into Aquarius, and what does that mean? This is usually defined as the cycle low, the low point for real estate. This is why I'm suggesting that there's a recession in 2027 and then there's a housing market bubble burst in 2027 in the Western markets and the economies, US, Canada, UK, etc. What's the backing for this? Well, go back 18.6 years and we're in 2008. That wasn't so good. Go back another 18 years and that's the 1990s recession where there was equities were down and also the housing market was down. Go back to 1972, 1973, there was also a house price crash. Worth mentioning that 1973 also had an oil crisis. But we know, this is one of the topics of our society, is that the house prices are too expensive, and, the young folks can't get on, and housing is so inflated. And, you see Toronto and London and Dublin, that story has been played so much. We know that there's a correction coming. It's most likely going to be within 2027. Why do I say that? Because North Node into Aquarius, starts around July 27th. It's there until March 2028. So it's really making its home for 2027. And just as Olga mentioned on her video, she just had that idea, the WD Gann idea of the years ending with 7 being more bearish. I don't think it's a huge crash this year. I think the second half of this year is correct. It's definitely correction territory, certainly going into October. So that's where I'm standing on that for real estate.
I think, that cycle is pretty predictable. I think I was taking a course with, was it Lynn Bell? And she was talking about the North Node Cancer housing industry inflates, right? I forgot what she said about North Node Aquarius, but to me, the prices are untenable. And it's the Gen Zs who are out there living in their parents' basements who are literally going to be the ones who have suffered and will benefit ultimately from a correction, I hope, in the long run.
Yeah, this is good news, because we would expect the prices to come down in 2027. So if a young person in your life that's been saving, keep saving is probably the advice here, because scan the market in 2027 and there may be more deals than you expect. Again, I think the general idea here is we have this oil crisis incoming. We have Chiron in Taurus. We have this oil issue, which is not going away. That will be one of the major factors that contributes to a recession in 2027, and probably take the real estate market down with it. Eclipse season, this is again classic WD Gann. Eclipse, he identified eclipses as very important markers for trend changes in markets. Now we've had 17% within the last few months. It seems ripe for a correction. And if not Jupiter-Pluto opposition, then going into eclipse season looks likely. We have this solar eclipse at 20 Leo. This is activating the chart for oil that I use personally. It actually gets hit on the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. So on the solar eclipse, it conjoins the natal K2 Mars and Saturn. Uranus, transiting Uranus, is squaring the natal Sun Mercury of that chart. And then by the lunar eclipse, it's opposing the natal Sun Mercury in the oil chart. For me to translate that into English, oil is kicking off again during eclipse season in August. The whole Iranian situation, if you want to give it like a 2-second read, Saturn-Neptune is deceptive. It's the media is not telling you what's really going on. It's when a war is about oil, one of the most fundamental commodities in the Western world. It's too important to tell the public the truth, right? The implication of oil and 25% of the Western economy being dependent on that stuff, and our whole economy, a whole way of life is highly dependent on that. As with other oil wars, it's so high stakes that we shouldn't be telling the public anything. That's the kind of deceptive, illusory Saturn-Neptune vibe that I'm getting for this war. And peace deal or no peace deal, whatever's happening in the background there, oil is kicking off in eclipse season through my speculative analysis, right? It's through my speculation. I don't know what your thoughts are there for like eclipse season.
Yeah. So you're taken off like the Uranus Sun square you just brought in. You mean like suddenly we thought it couldn't get more precious and it's even going to go higher per price in the barrel per price? Is that what you mean? I'm pulling a Libra Sun.
I'm pulling a Libra Sun thing when I say volatility, because they always say, "What do you mean volatility?" I can't see a world in the second half of 2026 in which it all gets resolved and we're no longer at war and oil is back down to $80, right? It's going up, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think the part of the thing to think about with just like the war in the Middle East with Israel and Gaza, well, that's not a war anyway, it's asymmetrical. But just like that situation, it was triggered by 2 eclipses, the spring 29-degree Aries eclipse followed by the Libra 14 eclipse, 21-degree eclipse in the fall of that year, a week after October 7th. But, when wars start on eclipses, and it was the Aquarius eclipse in February, this was the beginning of the war with Iran again, this version of it. Those wars last at least 18 months because they were initiated under eclipse energy. That means 18 months to 2 years, this is a thing. So I'm not anticipating, the end of the year, this is wonderful. But the other thing you said, I mean, Chiron and Taurus was not only the Great Depression and all of that, and the 1929 stock market crash, but it was the Jimmy Carter crisis around oil and gas, and literally made worse by the administration pumping it the wrong way and causing even more precious prices in the oil and gas for the consumer. The terrible level of inflation where interest rates one summer went skyrocketing like 20%. I loved that for my bank account when I was in university. It was something stupid. And of course, and the stock markets literally, of course, reacted, because now it's better to put your money in high yield places that are stable, like bonds and treasuries or whatever. So all said and done, like, to me, like, we're going to recapitulate, the late 1920s into the 30s, Chiron and Taurus for 7 years. That's going to come back to the Carter administration, the oil crisis, et cetera. Again, like, we're going to history repeats, cycle repetition. And it just happens to be the mechanism for this new oil gas crisis is a war, not about a nuclear power potential for enrichment, but because it's to acquire a regional oil and gas power play, just like Venezuela, just like Greenland, right? These are all about the hegemonic desire to control trade routes and supply of oil. It's all one thing.
Yeah, absolutely agree there. And, there are so many astrological confluences, and in case I've not made myself clear so far, it is just looking very bearish, basically, going into the second half of the year. Is it the year of the big dramatic crash? I'm more anticipating maybe 2027, but certainly going into the second half of this year, very correction heavy, oil issues, gas issues, cost of living issues. Rahu in Aquarius is not great. Saturn-Neptune conjunction and Jupiter-Pluto opposition. That's like 3 key cycles hitting 1 year at one time. So it's not looking great, to be very simple about it. This is kind of a fun one, because whenever we have eclipses coming, we can also look at the natal charts of companies to kind of see how they might react. And there's a few companies that I looked at that are getting hit by the eclipse. One is Uber. If we take the natal chart of Uber, the eclipse will be squaring the natal sun. And as you know, with eclipses, you can kind of give a 1 month window before, 1 month window after, depending on your preference for eclipse windows. And eclipses, W.D. Gann was all about eclipses. He told us that the total solar eclipses are the most potent, of which I'm pretty sure this is a total solar eclipse in August. Uber is getting hit by that, the natal chart. The stock for Reddit is getting the eclipse square to the natal Uranus. The IPO chart for JP Morgan and Co., which was a 1942 date, again, for JP Morgan related stuff, there's like 10 charts. But for one chart for the IPO of JP Morgan and Co., that chart is also getting eclipsed. I'm not saying JP Morgan is going to explode and everything, but there could be reputational issues. There could be administrative issues. There could be some revealing of some, inner games behind the scenes, regulatory issues that could impact the reputation and the stock here. Again, we've talked about the oil chart, which is getting lit up multiple times. And, advanced micro devices, again, one of these key tech players, for this AI bull run, is also getting hit there. So that's
is AMD semiconductor?
Yes, yeah, semiconductors. Okay. Semiconductors have done brilliantly recently, but is now at the point where is this now a bubble? How much further can this go? So we need the harder it rises, the harder it falls, right? We expect some what they call reversion to the mean. That basically means if it goes up for ever and ever by a massive amount, it needs to come back down. It needs to revert to its average.
That's the nature of reality. I can see Uber having trouble. First of all, the oil price for the driver versus the revenue, that they're getting. And also people like going, we use Uber. We use Uber because we're going out drinking and partying and we want to get home safely. That's why people use Uber, is primarily that, or get to the airport or back from it. So, I mean, that whole, I have a feeling like the whole restaurant industry and the party industry and the social, eating out industry, I think that's going to contract with the cost of food, from fertilizer delays to shipping costs. And we're going to see contraction in party hardy restaurant fun, energy, really. People won't do it much. They'll cook at home.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree. And, it's it's just overshadowed by how much of our economy is dependent on the whole oil and the cost of living, etc. It all ripples out. It all affects all of those sectors. And yeah, I completely agree with that. That's a good read. I'm going to skip that one because I know we want to be concise with time here. September, okay. Uranus retrograde, that is, a classic indicator of, okay, how far have the tech stocks gone? Uranus is a key planet to be looking at with all things financial. Retrograde could be reevaluation here, some drawback. Happening within the eclipse season is not great either. Not only this is like eclipse season window, it's also Uranus retrograde. There's some profit taking. I think there's some bearish activity for the tech stocks around here. But October is kind of the toughest month for me, in my opinion. And I'm expecting some bottoms here, some lows in crypto and tech by October. Why is that? Well, we've got the Venus retrograde coming up, which the markets don't generally like. But I've also noticed that on the oil chart that I use, every time there's a Venus retrograde around the midheaven, 8 degrees of Scorpio is the midheaven for this oil chart that I use. Every time there's a Venus retrograde around there, there's always some sort of oil story in the news. And of course, we've delineated from lots of different astrological signals that it's the second half of the year. Everything is down to the oil issue, right? It just affects everything. So that is another confluence for me. That Venus retrograde will square Pluto October 19th. So I'm expecting some lows here for Bitcoin. And people can often say with financial astrology, these predictions are a bit vague. Here's a price call. At the start of the year, when we were trading Bitcoin at around 90K in January, and I put my article out in December and said, this is going to have a terrible year. We're now at 60K. I mean, if you put your life savings in that, you've taken a heavy hit. And I don't think it's over. We're only halfway through the year. Saturn is still hovering around the natal moon. We've got the Saturn square, the natal sun. So I think by October, we're looking at 45K to 50K. That's entirely possible. I'm not one of these astrologers who say, oh, it's going to zero or it's going to 1 million. It's entirely logical and entirely probable that we're around 45K Bitcoin. I know,
does that drag everything down, Ethereum and everybody? I mean, will it always track that when Bitcoin goes down, everybody goes down, or are there going to be exceptions to that?
Well, that's the general rule. All the crypto industry generally follows Bitcoin and Ethereum. Mm-hmm. Of course, there could be some outperformers, with high value, high utility altcoins. Hyperliquid is looking like a really good one. XRP is a very popular one, but in the XRP chart, again, at the start of the year, I said XRP looked like it could go to $1, and it was trading at $2, and it has now. It's like at $1.12. So it seems entirely probable that we're heading to the $1 XRP, possibly even sub $1 XRP by August. Because in the natal chart for XRP, we've got K2 coming right for the ascendant.
Oh gosh! Well, that's pretty literal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's super literal. Again, it's those kind of signatures which add to the layer. One of the reasons why I call Bitcoin so bearish is one reason amongst many was the solar return chart for the Bitcoin Genesis block had K2 exactly conjunct the ascendant on the solar return. Like there was some other positive things, but K2 was exact on the ascendant. I was like, uh-oh. And then you take in consideration, what's technicals look like, what's the Saturn-Neptune saying. You layer it. We're never using astrology on its own, but we're layering multiple factors, layering the technicals, the fundamentals, and that's how we generate a thesis. So absolutely. 45K to 50K Bitcoin, and then XRP down to $1 by October, sub $1 is quite probable. And just to keep things concise here, once we see those lows in October, I am anticipating, a bit of a recovery, reversion to the mean, a bit of a softer November to December period, especially December, Sun trine Jupiter, Mercury trine Jupiter. And that's not just the astrology, but that's just seasonality in the markets. If we have those lows and real hits in the economy by October, we'd expect, a little bit of relief from that going into Christmas season. That's just standard.
And post the U.S. midterms in November too. I mean, there might be a euphoria of change. Oh my God, there's hope in the air. Like there's just a vibe there. You know what I mean? If everyone blames the Trump administration for tanking the economy, and all of a sudden there's a flood of Democrats into the story, there may be like a euphoric hope there.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of forgot to take that into consideration. I keep forgetting those elections are coming up. I don't track, as much of that as I should, but certainly it's hard to argue that Mr. Trump has been great for the economy. But it's So maybe there's some change there. And again, in case people think I'm, being a bit too vague, which is something that financial astrologers are always criticized of, I'm looking around 45 to 50K for Bitcoin by October. Oil, I think, is quite conservative to be looking at 115 to 120 by October, by the time that's all kicked off. But it's not just the fact that oil's at that price, it's the fact that it ripples into everyone's lives. It just affects everyone's cost of living. Mm-hmm. So August to October, that's my bearish period in the markets with the oil crisis intensifying. Gold, I think it's reasonable to look at $5,500 to $6,000 by the end of 2026. That's certainly what major investment banks are looking at, and banks are loading up on gold. So with more chaos coming in that second half of the year, I don't see why that's not a logical idea. Again, we've mentioned XRP. Again, it's looking quite probable. That was quite a shocking and dramatic and quite clickbaitable prediction at the start of the year. Oh my God, XRP is $1. It was trading at $2, and now it's $1.12. So that seems like it's coming. And I am generally bullish on copper. In January I said April through May is looking really good for copper. And then April through May, we reached all-time highs for copper. And copper is absolutely fundamental to the whole AI build out here, right? So when we're looking at the next couple of years, this is kind of going beyond 2026, but as we go through this industrial revolution and we see all of the gains from the AI and the tech stuff, it's not so much about putting your money in the tech companies themselves, but what's the fundamental resources that we need? Copper is one of them. There's not enough copper in the world. The demand is surging for that. It's fundamental to all of your electronics. So copper miners could be a very good play over the next 3 to 4 years. That's my speculative opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. I thought we needed helium too, and that's being held up in the Strait of Hormuz for various things. I mean, you can't, what was it I read about helium? Not just for the tech industry, but helium is not, you can't make helium. You got to get it out of the ground, and it comes through the oil and gas industry, right? As a part of the process of extracting oil from the ground. And I thought helium was a pretty big need to have in the tech industry. Is that true? And are you investing in helium? Helium supplies are diminishing now.
Absolutely. I saw a website that somebody made which tried to track the whole AI supply chain and kind of visualize, bigger circles for more dependent areas, smaller circles for less dependent areas. What that website showed me is that the AI supply chain people underestimate how fragile it is. As you said, just transporting things and just getting things from A to B. The whole supply chain of resources and materials that gives us our AI revolution is so fragile. And the fundamentals like helium and copper, etc., they look primed because it hasn't been a lot of attention. They're not sexy investments. They're not like Nvidia. Oh, cool. They're fundamental. They're boring. And it's kind of like in the market when there's less attention, when there's less mass collective consciousness on an asset, the market doesn't evaluate it correctly. It doesn't value it as much. Do you see where I'm coming from there? When the whole mass consciousness is on Nvidia, it's like, woo, everyone's looking at it. But because no one cares about boring old helium, it doesn't get priced correctly because people
the building blocks, the actual fundamental building blocks for the technology are more critical than the fancy companies' way of using it, right? NVIDIA. So I think that there's a lot to be said for looking at the natural resource industry, or what do you call it? The other one, the rare minerals industry as well.
Rare earth minerals, yeah.
Rare earth minerals. These are things that are going to take a lot of attention. We're going to need them basically if we're supposed to do what we're doing. I also wonder why somebody doesn't develop some kind of technology yesterday already to do with, I don't know, multiplying water like Jesus did with the bread and the wine. Give me some wine, somebody. Jesus, you're here. Thank you. Yeah. Because literally, data centers require a huge amount of coolant with water, and water supplies and aquifers are already drying out. And we also have drought energy coming this summer based on the El Nino and the sky as well, especially anytime Leo gets hot, like in fire signs. And so, or Mars gets heated up in fire signs like Leo. And so ultimately we're going to end up probably with a droughtish, hot, blistering kind of weather. And if people want to make these data centers, take a swath of land, but you need to irrigate or take water from somewhere. You need water. Someone needs to invent, if we're going to actually have AI work, build the AI data centers on seaboards and find an energy efficient, 0 point field technology to use that water if it needs to be desalinated, because I don't know. But I'm just going to say water technology, water shortages, and water issues over the next decade, I think are going to be a big deal.
I never really kind of thought about that, but that is an interesting point, because it's very strange that these data centers require like very premium grade fresh water. You can't just put it from a tap. It needs the purest water. It's kind of weird. It requires the most pure forms of water. And yeah, there's going to be so much, again, just supply and demand. There's going to be so much demand for that. Where is it coming from? And, how does people in the West are also disconnected from the seasons, right? Because we don't have to know if it's going to be raining to get our rice and our wheat and how our crops are going to do. We just take it for granted that the food's going to be there in the supermarket. So there's a disconnect between actual physical, rain seasons and harvests and the production and circulation of these actual raw materials, how it actually goes into their everyday life. And water is an interesting one. I don't know, like I remember hearing was it the CEO of Nestle or, one of these shady characters saying that one day we should privatize water. And I'm sure they would love that, for sure. But yeah.
Brazil, China, Canada are three of the most natural freshwater rich countries in the world. And I think that, United States making moves on Greenland for whatever. Next is Canada. And, I had a fiction book idea years ago that I started to write, because I am also a writer, and I'm a fiction writer at Vibe. And it was literally like a dystopian future world where basically, the water resource rich places like Canada were like fought over like by Russia and China and the United States, and who would win. And Canada had like the half the country was the United States, the Great Lakes, they had that. But then north of us, Russia grabbed the top half of Canada.
Yeah.
So
poor Canada.
Yeah, I know. We're sandwiched in here. But
sandwiched there. I'm only 20 minutes from Parliament, so I'll go and speak to Mr. Carney about this when I next see him.
Tell him that we don't even have to worry about our oil pipelines. We need to secure our freshwater resources and become a freshwater superpower.
Yeah. Oh, Canada, as they say.
Oh, Canada. Yeah. Yes, I know. I used to live on Elgin Street, like literally. There's a fire. There's a police station on Elgin near that bridge thing, and then I could walk to Parliament. But I remember when Princess Diana came to visit Ottawa in the 80s. I'm an old lady, and I was living at a really cool old building right across the street that had been refurbished, and with other students, right? In like 5 of us in one like 4-bedroom old unit from the 1800s.
Oh, nice.
But I walk out my door, and there's the police station. There's Princess Diana, and I'm like, before she was married to the guy. And I'm like this close to her, and she's shaking hands, and I got these great pictures. And so I used to live in Ottawa. You guys are listening. Rona, I talked about, he's living where I used to live, the city where I went to university in Canada, despite that charming British accent, right? He's now in Canada.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the Canada. And it's true what they say, it's some of the nicest people I've ever met in it. I'm having such a great time, and we're going to Algonquin, and we're exploring the nature. And
how long have you been here now in Canada? How long have you been in my home and native land?
Well, I was in Toronto for about a year in 2024 because, that's the obvious choice. And Toronto was great. I loved it. It was a huge contrast from where I was originally from. And then I left a job, and I took a weekend trip up to Ottawa, and I met my beautiful girlfriend. And, the Grahas had their influence on me, and
they grabbed you.
Here we are. They grabbed me.
Oh my God. I'd love to look at the inception chart for that relationship then. How destined is that? That's beautiful.
Hey, all I'll say is she's got Jupiter going through her 7th house, so I can't be doing that bad, eh?
No, that's wonderful. Well, welcome to Canada.
Thank you.
Where can all of our viewers find you? I loved your presentation. It was concise. It was easy to understand and fun to listen to. Where do you want people to most find you? Give us some places. I'll have them all in the description box.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for having me, Laurie. And I appreciate, I do have a habit of kind of talking fast and going off. So I'm working on that. So if you guys have stuck around to this point, I really do appreciate it. I'm available on Substack. I've actually got a 20% off code for you, Laurie viewers. That if you use that link, or maybe we'll pop it in the description or something, it gives you 20% off on the monthly and the yearly options. And I also do private wealth astrology consultations based on Vedic astrology techniques. My clients have been very happy with that so far. And there's also a 20% off code there using the code Lunatic20. So yeah, I should be more active on YouTube, but I'm kind of chronically online on Substack every single day. I really like the vibe of Substack. It's giving me kind of Uranus and Gemini new social media kind of feel to it. I'm trying to do more YouTube, but I'm kind of head in the sand with Substack. I'm liking a lot of people over there.
Okay, wonderful. We'll have people go all places, and I will put those generous codes in the description box as well. And I usually do it like a new intro that kind of encapsulates our conversation. I'll let people know in my new intro appended to the video as well about the codes. That was wonderful of you and very generous. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's been a great conversation, and I would love to be able to say there's great times coming, guys, and it does look bearish, it does look tough. This is why we need to be taking more responsibility for our personal finances in this world. We need to be educating ourselves. We need to be realizing that the financial industry doesn't benefit from you educating yourself on these topics. We need to take all the tools that the elites have previously used, astrology included, and we need to take a lot of personal responsibility for our wealth building as part of a wider spiritual life. So that's my thoughts on it.
Oh, yeah, I 100% concur. I was a former medium-term trader. I'm not afraid of the markets and money, but when you get too far down your spiritual life, sometimes you could think that there's like antithesis when there's no separation, right? So it was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure. And I hope to be able to see you in Canada at some point. Well, we're going to work together to find a way to make each other.
Oh, I'd love to.
I have family in Ontario. And so if I'm in Ontario and have some family in Ottawa, I'll definitely let you know. Thank you, Rowan. That was fun. That was really, really well done. And I think my audience is going to love this. And thank you for being on my channel. I'm going to shut us both down at the same time so I can go have have a dinner and all of that, my martini hour or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm so delighted. You were a wonderful guest. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Laurie. It's been fantastic, great fun. And thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
You're welcome, my dear. Namaste.
Namaste. I automatically go for one of those.
Ciao, ciao, my dear.
Ciao, ciao. Namaste.
Namaste.
Lunatic astrology.